There is a blatant form of media manipulation taking place on all the elite news platforms. Some people call it media bias, but it really is more manipulation than anything else. It was originally called yellow journalism. Now, in this episode, there's a twist, so stay tuned. Eventually, you're going to say, "You're kidding me." So stick with me on that. In the meantime, this is the Brian Sussman Show. I'm Brian Sussman, and this is episode number 4. I'm here in the man cave. Please make sure you subscribe to this channel. I would appreciate that. And if you can like it and share it as well, all the better. Media manipulation, yellow journalism. Let's get to the history of that. Yellow journalism is mainstream. And that, along with academic indoctrination, psychological intimidation, and an increasingly extortionate business culture, we've come to this time and place whereby so many have been easily suckered into believing all sorts of lies, including that the climate is in peril, it's your fault, and the only answers come from a transformation of society induced by government power. Of course, this transformation has nothing to do with a spiritual revival. As I mentioned, it's a government-induced takeover in the works, in the guise of, we're all going to get along. Now, I should begin with establishing my credibility on this matter. I graduated from the University of Missouri, which at the time arguably had the top journalism school in the world. At the journalism school, we learned point-counterpoint reporting, getting both sides of the story. We were also never allowed to use sources that were unnamed. My first job out of college was anchoring the evening news at the ABC TV station in Columbia, Missouri, and managing the small newsroom as well. We did point-counterpoint news. There was no editorial bias except when it came to sports, and then we were all for the home team. It wasn't until my next job in Reno, Nevada, that I began broadcasting the weather. I eventually became a meteorologist, worked for many years at Channel 5 in San Francisco, and occasionally filled in on the CBS Morning News in New York. San Francisco was the 5th largest television market in the country, big market TV, and I used to have big battles behind the scenes, for example, with the marketing department. They'd hear that some sort of storm was rolling into the area, and they'd put together flashy news teases, which would say, "Torrential downpours coming, Brian will have the forecast." Only problem is they never talked to me. There was no torrential downpour coming. It was just going to be sprinkles. Then there were the editorial battles I would have behind the scenes. I wrote about this one in ClimateGate, but it needs to be told for the sake of this episode. I had a producer who, when he was in college, was president of his Students for a Democratic Society chapter. SDS was a communist organization. Now he was in charge of a sector of the newsroom. He produced one of the newscasts. He had an argument with me one day about global warming. And he settled the argument like this. He whispered in my ear so that no one could hear. He said, "Brian, your problem is you don't know which facts to leave out." You see, misleading teases and leaving out certain facts falls into the category of yellow journalism. Big headlines, flashy graphics, crime, immorality, unsubstantiated and unsourced reporting, persuasive editorials, pushing political candidates and destroying others. That's yellow journalism, and including sources, unnamed sources. How many times have you heard a news report where they say, "Sources tell us"? You know, back when I was in college, that was not allowed. Who are those sources? How do we know that reporter without a moral spine is just making stuff up? Well, let's get to the history of this yellow journalism. It began in the early 1900s with a very successful businessman who had a penchant for Marxist political theory. In 1864, a young man immigrated to the United States from Hungary, settling in St. Louis, Missouri. He worked at a tavern where he became influenced by Henry Clay Brockmeyer, a local flamboyant philosopher, poet, and state senator who was leader of a local Hegelian club. There were quite a few of these Hegelian clubs in the bigger cities of America. They were named after the German philosopher George Hegel. He was a socialist before his time, a communist, if you will, and had great impact on Karl Marx while Marx was in college in Berlin. In fact, the Hegelian club Marx was in had a slogan, "Liquidate Christianity." It's said that this young immigrant would hang on to Brockmeyer's thunderous words even as he served pretzels and beer. Our subject was quite taken by Brockmeyer's wide-ranging discourses that included Hegel's unorthodox social, economic, and political sentiments. The young man eventually became a newspaper reporter as well as a mover and shaker in Missouri politics, eventually being elected into the state's legislature. He was good friends with the political cartoonist Joseph Kepler, publisher of the controversial Puck magazine, and recalled in history for his powerful one-panel Seeds of Socialism cartoon. In 1878, the young man purchased the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. And in 1883, he moved on to New York to purchase the lackluster New York World newspaper with hopes of making it the voice of the Democratic Party, announcing that the paper would be dedicated to the cause of the people rather than that of the purse potentates. New York World quickly turned around as our man trained his staff in a writing and reporting technique much like what we see today, teasing readers with flashy headlines, sensational stories, scandals, horrors, dramatic illustrations, eye-popping graphics, and reporting that was often unsubstantiated, light on the facts, and dripping with political and social commentary. New York World newspaper became the largest selling newspaper in the entire world, and our man became the toast of New York. In fact, he was so popular that he ran for Congress and easily won. However, he resigned from Congress before his first term was up. Why? Because he felt he had more influence as a newspaper publisher than he did as a U.S. congressman. Then something ironic took place. He approached New York's Columbia University with a very interesting offer. Perhaps it was to improve his image as a legitimate keeper of the Fourth Estate, or maybe it was his hope that such a school could produce the next generation of radically biased reporters. But his desire was this. He wanted to fund the world's first school of journalism and establish an annual prize for the press. Columbia turned him down. However, following his death in 1911, the publisher, who had become one of the wealthiest men in America with an estate worth $30 million, left $2 million for Columbia. With his death and the $2 million, our man got his journalism school. And the school decided they would put together a prize in his name. It would be a prize for great journalism. Isn't this interesting? The guy who gave us schlock journalism, who gave us yellow journalism, who gave us the original media bias and media manipulation, would get a prize in his name for quality. The Pulitzer Prize, named after our man, Joseph Pulitzer. Over the following decades, yellow journalism strategies gradually became more mainstream as the press transformed itself into a stage on which the actions of government and society are presented in a series of gripping dramas on a daily basis. Pulitzer's initial mold gave us the current theater of information we're inundated with today. Special interest groups, activists, lobbyists, and those with subversive agendas now provide the many stages with the countless actors and endless conflicts. In the case of global warming and climate change, I contend Pulitzer's influence has steadily provided that agenda with a secure place of residence. Should we be surprised that the founder of yellow journalism had a Marxist red streak flowing through his veins? Now, let's talk about the Associated Press. Initially, the Associated Press was founded to be the antithesis of yellow journalism. But recently, a group of very liberal organizations and foundations decided to fund the Associated Press, because they are a nonprofit group, fund them so that they could establish a climate desk and do more extensive reporting on democracy. Again, these were all liberal organizations that came forward with loads and loads of money, organizations that don't think much of conservative initiatives. Now let's connect a few dots. The Hewlett Foundation spent $2.5 million on the AP's climate and education reporting teams. In 2021, the Rockefeller Foundation, one of the country's largest private philanthropies, gave the Associated Press $750,000 for a climate change initiative to increase reporting on the increased and urgent need for reliable and renewable electricity. The Outrider Foundation also donated to the AP to beef up its coverage of climate change. One of their advisors is Michael Mann, the climate researcher behind the controversial hockey stick graph, which totally revised the planet's historical temperature record, eliminating past periods where the weather was clearly hotter than today. I wrote about that extensively in ClimateGate. But friends, this is yellow journalism. This is total manipulation. But there's something else that they do: labeling. The media's ability to label people and ruin people is one of its most subtle and potent schemes. Responsible people, who may be conservative, are sometimes stigmatized as far-right, ultra-conservative, right-wing extremists, narrow-minded, while the radicals, Marxist radicals, are called progressives or liberals, or sometimes even moderates. We are up against a machine without a moral backbone, a machine that will say anything and do anything for the sake of their cause. Therefore, we need to hold fast to the truth. Now listen, I'm just one guy. I've got a microphone. I've got a camera. I'm doing what I can. And I know many of you are doing what you can, and certainly much more than I. And I appreciate you for that. But we need to stand for the truth. Stand for the truth without compromise. We need to speak the truth in love. And we need to make sure that we support those rare organizations and candidates that are actually speaking for the truth and laying it out there on the line, asking nothing back in return. The book of Ephesians, chapter 4, verse 25 says this: "Therefore, having put away all falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor." And then Jesus said this in John 8:32, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Thanks for joining me in this edition of the Brian Sussman Show. More on me at briansussman.com. Please subscribe to this channel, like it, and share it. I would really appreciate that. Appreciate you. Until next time, we'll see you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.